Morning, sixth grade. Please follow along to this video about two new vocabulary words, range and IQR. So it can be helpful when we're looking at a set of data to think about the spread or how far apart our values are. In this data set, I can see different numbers of miles that are being biked, right? Maybe this person is training for a race and they're recording how many miles they bike each day. To find the range of this data set, I'm going to order my values from least to greatest, and I will identify the minimum or the smallest value and the maximum or the largest value. To calculate the range, all I need to do is subtract the maximum minus the minimum, and in this case, I will get a range of 8. The range tells me the spread of the data, how far apart these data points are spread. In this case, I can see that all of the data points are between 4 and 12, which means that all of the data points are within 8 miles of each other. Let's look at another example. This example says that Ala recorded the number of points scored this season by each member of her basketball team. To calculate the range, I will first put these values in order from least to greatest, and I will identify the minimum and the maximum values and subtract those to get a range of 14. In example 3, I also have a data set. This data set shows the scores that students got on Mr. Gar's most recent science test. To calculate the range of this data set, I will identify my minimum and my maximum, and I will subtract them to get a range of 92. Now, in this case, this range 92 isn't actually that helpful, and here's the reason why. I actually see that most students got between a 68 and a 99, right? Most students scored in this 70, 80, 90 range, right? Most students actually passed. But I have this one really low data point, 7%. I call this data point an outlier, which means not a typical data point, meaning a number that is either much lower or much higher than the rest of the values in my data set. And what this does is it throws off the range, right? It makes it so it's a little bit misleading when we're talking about the spread of the data. Luckily, there is another tool that I can use to represent spread or variability in a data set, and that is called the interquartile range. To find the IQR, or the interquartile range, I'm going to put my values in an ordered list from least to greatest, and I'm going to first identify the median. You learned about finding median earlier this week. The median is between 80 and 84, which means it is 82. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find the value that is in the middle of the lower half of my data set, right? So to the left of my median. The number that's in the middle of that is 72. I call this my first quartile, or Q1. I'll do the same thing with the upper half of data, and I'll get a value of 88. I call that my third quartile, or Q1. So I have my first quartile, the median is sometimes called the second quartile, and then I have my third quartile. To find the IQR, I just need to subtract the third quartile minus the first quartile. In this case, I'll get 16. Let's do one example together. This data set shows the height of 10 sixth graders, okay? Plus, there's an 11th data point, which is the height of the tallest person in the world. To find the range, I'm going to subtract the maximum minus the minimum, and I get 45. But I know that that 99 is an outlier, so it's throwing off my range a little bit. It's making it so that it's not quite as helpful when I talk about the spread of the data. So let's find the IQR. First, I identify the median. Then I'm going to go ahead and find the middle of the first half of data set. If I just have one median point, I'm not going to include that when I find the middle of the first half. Here I can see that the middle is actually two values, so I'm going to find the average of them, and I get 56. I'll do the same thing up here. Q3 is 61.5. The interquartile range I will find by subtracting Q3 minus Q1 to get 5.5. So to summarize, range and IQR both show variability or spread of the data, but if there's an outlier in the data set, IQR is a better measure of spread because the range is more impacted by the outlier. Take a look at these data sets and decide, should you use IQR or a range to measure the spread? Well, if there is an outlier like there is in A and C, you should use IQR.